HBO's Avenue 5 takes place on a space cruise in 2060, with Suzy Nakamura playing its all-seeing Iris. I'm Riley Chow of Gold Derby. Now, Suzy, this is a show that really packs its scripts full of punchlines. So what's your favorite quirk of Iris's?
I love that she's a control freak, especially because of what happens on the ship and what happens, in space. There's so much that she doesn't have control over, and I don't know. It just makes me laugh to watch someone unravel. Yeah, there's a comedy, I think, in the helplessness.
Now, you're the personal assistant of Judd, but then I just watched an interview with Armando Iannucci where he referred to you as the CEO, and I've also seen you online referred to as the associate owner. So what is Iris's role on Avenue 5?
I would say she's the CEO or like a top executive. I think when we say Judd's right, Herman Judd's right-hand man, I think people assume it's an assistant, but she's definitely an executive. And I think she's basically the buffer between, let's say, an owner and then the everyday workings of a big corporation. I mean, she's not just the buffer, she's the, organizer, mediator, translator, that kind of stuff.
Now, what kind of a backstory did you give the character?
You know what? I didn't, what's interesting is when you're developing a character for the first time, you can just only discuss so much with the writers. And there's also a little bit that you want to leave open for the writers, just in case they want to add something or add some backstory or add some history in subsequent episodes or, seasons. And so the only history that we were given in one of the scripts is that Judd and Iris have been together, I think, for 12 years. It was something like that. So I always, in my mind, I always pictured her just sort of like working for the Judd corporation and maybe leaving. Maybe she was headhunted and stayed with the corporation. I mean, I had to give her a motivation to stay in this very difficult, trying position where she's asked to do a lot of things that most executives aren't asked to do. And so that was the backstory that I gave her. And I think I just discussed it briefly with the writers, is that she's just sort of not a climber, but she's very driven.
What about a backstory for the world of the show? Because we kind of find out a little more about it in each episode. How much did you know at the start?
The only thing I knew is that it was, 40 years in the future, and the rest we either discovered in the scripts or we kind of made up as we go along. And we haven't really talked about the world, so to speak, that's on Earth. It's referred to, it's mostly in passing, and it's mostly in the form of a joke. Like, remember cats, that kind of stuff, and the fires and the wars, and now DC is not in, the White House isn't in DC anymore. And that serves sort of the joke function. But I think what Armando wanted to do was basically create a relationship comedy, not relationship, but like a workplace comedy, almost situational comedy, but without writing about it, specifically to a world that doesn't exist.
Now, I imagine that you're shooting a lot more than we actually see, just because, there's so many punchlines that I feel like they'll figure it out, what will actually go into the show later. So I'm wondering how different the show turned out to be for you as a viewer versus acting on it, and kind of what surprised you about how it played out.
It's not that different because, structurally they have to have a story, and you have to, establish setups and a narrative and a through line, that kind of stuff. But what surprised me when I watch it is, we're allowed to improvise sometimes at the end of a take, and it's always surprising to me, like, how much they keep. because the scripts are so good and the jokes are there and the relationships are there, the dialogue is there, and then a director won't say cut or Armando won't say cut, so we'll just keep going, and not in an effort to get more out there, but just sort of because we're sort of trained dogs in a way that we won't stop unless someone tells us to stop. And when I see that included in the final episode, that's always a surprise. It makes me really happy.
Who would you say is your most underrated co-star?
I mean, they're all underrated only because when you're working directly with someone, the work they do is rarely seen because the camera is on you. So, you know, when you're talking at least. And when you're working in an ensemble, everyone has to work to make someone else look good. And it's one of those qualities, it's one of those talents that you have to support, and no one will know you're doing it. You will never get credit for it. And you know, all you do is, if everyone in the ensemble spends all their energy making someone else look good, then the entire ensemble shines. It'll never show on screen, really. I mean, I think if you're an ensemble actor, you recognize when other people do it, but you have to do it to make another joke land better or make a setup funnier. And so all you do is support. So basically, I mean, I know this is not a good answer, but every person I'm in a scene with is an unsung hero, because all they do is make me look better, and I try and do that for everyone I'm in a scene with.
Now, there are a lot of scenes where it's just you and Judd or Ryan, but there are also a lot of scenes where you have maybe like 50 or 100 people behind you. So can you tell me about the difference in shooting those two types?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are differences. Obviously, the space is bigger, and we, you know, interact sometimes with the passengers. And but what's great about the larger scenes is it really lends itself to the world that we're in. And I have to give credit to the designers, the cinematographers, the you know, every department adds to that, and including the supporting artists, the extras, because they're all in makeup and hair and wardrobe, and they've painted this 40 years in the future as kind of a happy, positive world. You know, we're not in space agey grays and blues and dark colors. Like, everyone's in bright. They're also on a cruise ship, but that really adds to the tone of, or actually the setting of what you're playing in, especially if something bad happens. And it's really great. And that, I talk about the unsung heroes. It's sort of our guest stars and our background artists, because they work really hard, as in on any show, and they're just, sort of seen, but they really add to the energy, and they create this large space, which is this massive spaceship. And to fill it with people only adds to that environment.
I want to ask about the last scene specifically, because you're on the, I don't know what you call that, the remote ship. Like, was that the same set as the rest of the characters, or was that stitched together later in visual effects?
Oh, no, I was in that rescue shuttle behind the glass of all the actors. And it was so funny because it was so great for me to see that, because being John, the pilot of the rescue shuttle, watched everything almost like they were in a disaster aquarium. And I actually snuck I wasn't supposed to take pictures on the set, but I snuck my phone in the rescue shuttle and I took a couple pictures, because it looked so insane. It almost looked like a painting, because I saw them running around and screaming. I got to look for that photo on my phone. Don't tell anyone I did that. But yeah, they could see my face, and when there was sort of a musical chairs about who's getting on the rescue shuttle, we all got to see them and interact with them, and hats off to the set builders and designers for building that way, because that would be very difficult to do if we were separate.
So you're the only person who actually got off the ship and didn't die, it seems. So are you happy about that?
Yes, I think most actors are happy when their character doesn't die. You know what? I'm really looking forward to season 2, because if I'm heading toward Earth, I don't know what my world is going to be like. You know, we talked about earlier that we don't know what Earth is like. Really, we've seen Rob, ask for help, and we've seen NASA and that kind of stuff, but we don't know what like everyday life really looks like. Although one of my favorite scenes was Rob in a cab, like in a taxi cab.
Oh,
I don't know why that thrilled me so much. It was almost like a glimpse to what Earth looked like. And Iris is going to be there, so that should be fun, like really fun.
Yeah. How much do you know about season 2, and how much do you want to say?
I don't know if I could say anything, and I don't know that much, except I did, we did have meetings with Armando about season 2. He's kind of got it mapped out. And so he was kind of discussing, well, this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And it was like scrumptious in a way. I don't know what I can say. But yeah.
Okay, great. We'll work with that.
I'm trying to think of like what wouldn't be a spoiler, but it's going to be different for Iris. I can only speak for my character. But it'll be good.
What about, was she written for you? Because you had been on Veep beforehand. So did you go through an audition, or is this role, written for you?
She was not written for me. I did work on Veep, and so I knew Armando, and I auditioned. I read the scene. I don't think I saw the script. I think I just saw the audition scene, and I was given the premise. This is set in the future, and it's on a spaceship. But I remember reading the scene, and it was hilarious. Like, I loved the scene so much. And I just auditioned for Armando came to the United States, and I auditioned in the casting director, and that was it. I only met with him once.
Do you remember what scene it was?
It was the scene where I tell the comic, played by hilariously by Himesh Patel, and I basically say he has to do a stand-up set in the middle of this disaster. And it was in the original script. I think I go down to his room basically and say, you have to do this, and you have to do some of your routine for me right now. And we ended up shooting it in like a conference room. But that was really fun to finally do that audition scene.
I want to ask about Dead to Me, because you're back on that show this season, and you got a husband in Mark Evan Jackson. But did we ever actually see you two together?
No, and that kills me because I love Mark Evan Jackson. We're from the same theater in Detroit and Chicago. We're both in the Second City. And I didn't know who was going to play my husband. And when I found out it was him, I was really happy. But we ended up not having any scenes together. So I was disappointed. But I mean, I love him. I think he's hilarious.
And finally, I want to ask about a movie that you have coming up, Sumo, which is also produced by Armando Iannucci.
Yes.
I think you're the only announced cast member in that one. So what can you tell us about that?
I don't want to speak for the director, but when I read the script, I saw it as like almost like a sports movie, but also like Napoleon Dynamite, but also like the Karate Kid kind of. It's a sports movie. It's about a sumo wrestler, a female sumo wrestler, and they don't allow females to compete, at least professionally, in Japan. And so she's in California. She's in Torrance, California, and she works at a high school. And It's about this, and she sort of teaches this young kid about sumo wrestling.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing that. And Suzy, it's been a lot of fun. To our viewers, you can check out our interview with Josh Gad, and we look forward to seeing the second season.
Yes, me too. Nice meeting you, Riley. Nice talking with you.